Okay, today we're doing part 2 of vinegar. Last time we spoke about how to make vinegar. For certain parts of it are going to be relevant a little today, but most of it is not. Today I'm talking about things that are special halachas or applications that have to do with vinegar. Not every one of them is very, very specific to vinegar, but that apply to vinegar because it has its own special quirks halacha-wise to it. So first is that I count 6 special things that are dinner for Charif. And vinegar, of course, is Charif. I'm only going to mention 2.5 of them that are going to be relevant for us. The other ones are not so near to us, like not barnat, not so relevant to us. And one is that a sheini is usually more kal than a klivishin. Dinner klivishin, let's say, but the evidence everything is mutter. But that's not true when it's a davar charif. When davar charif in a sheini is like it's a klivishin. Okay, and we'll see a very particular application of that soon. The next one is that kovush usually takes 24 hours for kovush to happen. Something liquid sitting in the container takes 24 hours for kovush to happen. For tzir, kovush happens in a couple of minutes. And there's a machlokes whether davar charif has that same din. Does it also make quick kovush or not make quick kovush? And most hashkachas assume that it does not. Okay, that it takes the same 24 hours. Okay, and even this is I'm going to use words that we used from last time. Even if it's very strong vinegar, which we explained last time, means 120 grain vinegar. The way it actually comes out of the machines, when you make vinegar, it's at 12% strength, and we use it at 5% strength. The extra strong vinegar means that. L'chayra means that, and even in those cases, most hashkachas are mikal about that. Okay, so we think kovush takes 24 hours. And the half thing that I'm going to tell you that's not so relevant to us, I'm just going to mention it because too many people make a mistake about that. Is that even though we think that kovush takes 24 hours for vinegar, even though the din of mechayli l'shvach still applies to davar charif. Okay, so people connect those things, but they're not really connected. The din is that davar charif takes it ein ben yom b'tam and makes it back l'shvach, and that has nothing to do with whether kovush happens quickly or not. Okay, vinegar is a davar charif, so it's mechayli l'shvach. It's not something to get to us what we're going to talk about, but I'm just mentioning it just because people confuse that.
Why does it take 24 hours if it's charif?
What did you say?
Why do we say...
Everything takes 24 hours. No. Everything takes 24 hours. If you have apple juice, it takes 24 hours also.
For kovush, for the recharv, it usually takes shorter, right?
No. For tzir, for tzir it does. No, then the machlokes, the mechaber, and the shach. What about is charv also have that same din as tzir? The real din is by tzir. It happens quickly. What do you say?
What's unique about tzir?
Tzir, it's brine. It's super salty and it has special powers. Whatever reason, I can't explain any of these.
It's powers of drawing out faster.
Get out time faster, yeah. So somehow it has the magic. Correct. Most hashkachas, you could do privately what you want to. I'm saying, but most hashkachas follow that. It comes from Mishabur. What do you say?
And Mishabur.
It's from Mishabur. This says that it says even by strong, which l'chayr means the strong vinegar.
Mishabur is machma.
Meko. From Magen Avraham. Okay, so now, now we're going to branch into the different ways, things that have to do with vinegar, having to do with what's treif about them. So, last time I explained, usually what's going to be treif about vinegar is either it's because it is from Stam yayin or it has a connection to Stam yayin, like blias and things like that. That's one way, and the other way it could be not kosher. It could be Chametz. Okay, those are the 2 main ways it could be treif. I guess there are other ways also, but those are the 2 things you have to. So let's talk about Stam yayin first. Okay, the rule is Isser mixed into heter, the taruvus becomes mutter if it's batal b'shishim. Okay, there's 60 times as much heter as Isser. And the same thing is true if you mix stam yayin into food, then it also needs to be batal b'shishim. But if you put stam yayin into a mashka, then it's batal b'shisha, only 6 times as much. Okay, I'm gonna get in a minute to explain what that word mashka means. Okay, but if it goes into a mashka, then it's batal in 6 times. Okay, now Ramosha says, but what's the reason why it's batal in 6 times? And then that'll help us understand why not in an oichel does it need 60 times. So it's 3 steps over here. The first is like this. Usually when you make a juice out of something, that's a downgrade. You take apples, that's very pre-8, and you make apple juice out of it. That juice is, the Gemara says, called Zeib Alma. Like you don't even make the bracha on it, you make just a shahak on it. It lost connection, it's not part of the fruit. But in grapes, it's the opposite. When a grape is very pre-8, when you squeeze the juice out of it, it doesn't get worse, it gets better. Okay, it gets we judge that by its bracha, but it gets better, and it has a higher standard. It's not zeyabam. Okay, that's the first. Second is when we dilute grape juice or wine, when we dilute it too much, it loses that special chashivas. It used to be so special that it's even better than the fruit itself. When we dilute it too much, meaning in 6 times, then at that point it's lost this special characteristics. And the last step is, and memela, it loses the dinim that come along with the wine also. So the wine was also a stam yayin. It loses that din of stam yayin. It was trace. It was stam yayin. But now that it's so diluted, not only did it lose its status as being better than a fruit, but it lost that whole din, that all the din that were associated with it, lost it also. So that whole logic that I just told you only applies when it falls into a liquid. You take the wine and you put water into it. So now we're diluting this thing, and therefore it lost everything that it had, and it loses its issur also. When I take if I put the wine into food, okay, I'm trying to put it into food, but sometimes you put it into a food, then it's not being diluted, it's just being nosatam. It's treif being nosatam. So this treif, it needs to be bitul b'shisha like any other treif. Okay, we're not diluting the wine, we're not making it unwine, we're not diluting it. No, we're just putting wine into into a food, and that's what needs bitul b'shisha. Okay, so
how you wouldn't make agape specifically when it's diluted by 6?
correct. That's correct. Make shakal. That's correct. Make shakal.
Probably even less than 6. Right?
Well, that's a question. Maybe nowadays it's not so strong, but the ikra din is that it goes by 6. The question to do it with less is just because.
Does it taste like grape juice? Or?
Correct. Of course, it's going to taste. It will taste like grape juice. In fact, it will.
Well, what's it taste like?
It'll taste like very water.
If it's diluted by 6?
Of course, it will taste like that. Just like any
A
other
little
thing.
bit, it'll have a little flavor, but it won't
Taste like grape juice.
It will. You will notice the taste. You will notice the taste coming through. Just like if you apple juice, if you dilute it in a few times, you will also taste it. Also, it's not bottled so that you don't even taste it. Of course, you taste it.
The difference between tasting grape juice and it tastes like grape juice.
Yes. So I wasn't being so specific.
Tastes like grape juice.
Yes, correct. It does
It's-
taste good.
But it still is a ton of grape juice until shisha.
Correct. Okay, now, most people who heard those words that I just said, took about oichel and a mashke, think that oichel means a solid and a mashke means a liquid, right? That's what most people would think like that. Okay, and the Rishachter said, no, he says it's not true. That's not what the word mashke means. Mashke doesn't mean liquid. Mashke means beverage. Okay, you have to mix it into a beverage, and he had some rayas to that, for the way people talk about making kiddush on schnapps, and he said, no, and a beverage means something that you drink when you're thirsty. He says, so you drink grape juice when you're thirsty, you can drink water when you're thirsty, you can drink apple juice when you're thirsty. He says, but nobody drinks vinegar when they're thirsty. Vinegar is not a beverage, you don't drink it. And whiskey, no one drinks whiskey because they're thirsty. Oh gosh, I'm so thirsty, give me a cup of whiskey.
What's the sword of this?
What?
What's the sword that you're totally deaf going?
Why should it depend on that also? It's a fair question. And the riots were, there's a lot of questions. I'm not going through, we don't have time, I'm not going through his possible riots to that. But this is what he wanted to say, and he wanted to therefore say that vinegar is not going to be bitul b'shisha because I'm sorry. That's step 1, and then step 2 was not only is our vinegar and whiskey not mashkin, but there's a second step, and that if the din says if wine is bitul in the mashke, it's bitul b'shisha. He said, well, what happens if the wine itself is not a mashke? He says, and it goes into a liquid. He says, it also won't be bitul b'shisha. Okay, that's the second step. The first step was to say vinegar or whiskey is not a mashke. The second step is that now I don't care what's going into. I even care if the vinegar itself is a mashke. Okay, if the vinegar itself is in oichel form, it shouldn't be bought.
So I went through my shot about the blended whiskey.
No, he actually brought a riot from Moshe about blended whiskey.
So whiskey is not much.
Because over there he says no, because because it's going into whiskey. It's a fair question. Okay, I'm not sure. I take that back what I said before. I'm not sure what he answers that. I'm sure he thought about that, but I'm not sure what the answer is. Okay, it's a fair question, but he had a right from a different Shimon Moshe. But okay, I'm not sure. Rebelsky didn't like both of those possibilities. He brought his whole pile of his own rayas that vinegar is and whiskey are mashkin. Okay, a mashke in halachically they're considered to be a mashke. That term mashke means a liquid, doesn't mean a beverage. And he didn't like the second thing also. Let's say if it would be true, it would only be that you can't put the wine into that, but not that if the wine is in that form also. Okay, but in this case, so this debate stretched on for a while. They were back and forth about this. They didn't see each other. This is back and forth between each other of back and forth about this thing.
Rabbi.
What? Well, there was the Melitz, Rabbi Fishbane Senior, the Melitz Ben Nosam, just trying to make some peace over here. But no. This was a very unusual situation because there were three nafkaminas to whether Stam yayin is bitul b'shisha. So what happened was, sorry, I keep blowing my nose. That was we figured out that in the two real cases, each one of them was make masking to the other one for a reason. I'll tell you in a second. Okay, and the third case was so not negated. So I said everybody's happy. You can think your own shita what you want to. Halacha l'maisa, you know what we have to do, and that was like this. If you actually put vinegar into something, that there we should say shibata b'shisha. Let's say put vinegar into water or something like that. The Rebbe said, vinegar has a very and whiskey both have a very strong taste. So he was masking to say, it won't be bitul b'shisha. How can he say it's diluted? It's super diluted. He said, how can you say it's super diluted when it has such a strong taste? I'm not sure if I understand that, but that's what he said. And the opposite, in one of the cases, a steam system, Rav said, I'll be masking to Rebelski about bitul b'shisha over there also. And then the last case was one that wasn't so negaya, had to do with a way of kashering. So we made peace. And the peace was they didn't agree in the din. He thought this and he thought this, but in halacha l'maisa everyone agreed, so everybody was happy.
It's not even first in the Achronim about vinegar. It's bitul b'shisha. They have all these.
So
Does it mention that you are silka? Does he say shisha?
in silka
What's silka?
beets,
Yeah, beet vinegar.
beet alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't remember. We have to look it up. I don't remember. And so you could find, if you find me right, they will find you right in the most unusual places.
The Rishonim say the reason.
Rebelski is was a big bucky in Taharas. Okay, so he had all kinds of rice from Taharas, like Nebuch, of course, the Mishnah Machshir and where the Mishnah is. Yeah, and Machshir and like this is Mishnah Machshir, don't you know? Like everybody knows that. So
the Rishonim say part of the reason why it's bitul b'shisha is because this time of forgotten. Does that play any role over here or no? Just
well, I don't know if that's gonna make a difference. I don't know. That's talking about within the food itself.
well, why it's bitul b'mayim? Like the carved halacha, why it should be bitul b'mayim? Because the lashon has its cube alma. It's nice and time of forgotten to the mayim.
Yes, so I don't remember how that plays into here. I don't remember. Okay, we have a lot to do. I'm sorry. Okay, we're never gonna. I'll just keep on going. Okay. Kovush makes blia go in. I told you that kovush for vinegar is going to take 24 hours. But that it takes 24 hours. But the Shach says that there are the Shach, the way this side of the table reads it, says that there are four isurim where the blid is only, we say kovush is not kamavushal, kovush is only kedei klipa, and one of those is stam yayin. It has nothing to do with whether it's wine per se. So the same would apply to vinegar also. I'm not going to go through the whole details of that, but that's the Shach says that. Whether that's halacha, whether he thinks that's lamaisa, that's we could talk about that. But the Shach definitely says that there are four isurim, and one of them it's a kula of stam yayin that it's the bria is only kedei klipa, meaning we don't say kovush kamavushal means all the way through. It means just a kedei klipa's worth, and so that would apply to vinegar also. We would say the bria is only kedei klipa. Okay, let's move to other things. Again, I told you the other way that vinegar could be, so to speak, treif is if it because it could be chametz. Okay, that's very obvious that it could be chametz. So that plays out in the way for companies that we're giving hashgacha to, because the fact that the vinegar or the alcohol that it's made from, or the nutrients, or the third thing, might be chametz. That the vinegar, in essence, will be chametz. Means is any company that uses vinegar has to make mechiras chametz because. I forgot to say that. Yes, any Jewish, you're right. Any Jewish-owned company that uses. I didn't even write that. I did, yeah. Okay. So a Jewish-owned company would have to make mechiras chametz. And that's because it might be chametz. If it would be chametz, it would be chametz over Pesach, and we'd have a problem with it. Okay. I'll just throw in. I'll say it just because it's interesting to say anyhow. If we knew, let me say that first, and then I'll come back to this. Okay. But if we only could get away with letting the person do mechiras chametz because in the ikar adin we're going to assume the vinegar is not chametz. Okay, we're doing it to be extra careful that we do mechiras chametz for it to make them sell it. But what would happen if we really thought that the vinegar was chametz? Like, let's say we lived in, I don't know, in Europe, and the vinegar was really chametz. We wouldn't be enough just to do mechiras chametz, because then they would be, every time they used the vinegar on Pesach, they used it or they bought it or they sold it, all kinds of things would make their food usher also. Because the mechiras chametz wouldn't help. Mechiras chametz really only helps with stuff that they bought before Pesach and they kept the whole Pesach and they didn't use it till after Pesach. Okay, but like just like we won't let a Jewish-owned bakery run on Pesach, because the flour that they buy and the flour that they use and the cakes that they sell are all going to be chametz of a Pesach. Okay, so we wouldn't let someone do that if we knew they were using chametz. We have all kinds of complications. We'd say you have to close down. You have to find someone who's not Jewish who really takes ownership, like in a real serious way. So the reason why we're letting them do this with vinegar is because the assumption is that it's not chametz. Okay, in the United States, most of the vinegar is not chametz, and therefore it's it's made for corn.
Presumably it has different properties.
The vinegar?
Yeah.
But if you remember last time, you'd see, no, it doesn't have different properties.
Wine vinegar is surely.
We're talking about white distilled vinegar. If it's wine vinegar is not chametz.
Right.
Like that's a good example. Let's say a company was using malt vinegar. Okay, if a company was using malt vinegar, then we wouldn't let them do mechiras chametz. Mechiras chametz is not going to do the trick, because malt vinegar is chametz, and we would say to them, you have to stop using it for Pesach. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't use it. But if they're using regular vinegar, we would say, make mechiras chametz just sort of to cover ourselves, whatever that's worth, but we wouldn't stop them from using the thing. Okay, I'll mention. I don't know why it's. Okay, I won't mention. Okay,
Any company, Jewish-owned company that has white distilled vinegar must do at least a mechir.
Yeah, but the truth is, we tell any Jewish-owned company the mechiras chametz without asking what they make. We don't ask what they make. There are some companies that are real exceptions, like we know what they're doing, something like totally ridiculous. Okay, that we know there's not even a shiloh in the world it could be, so we maybe wouldn't bother them. But I'm saying we would be more focused. If a person was using vinegar, we'd pay more attention to it. But really, if we really thought it was chametz, then we wouldn't let mechiras chametz wouldn't do the trick. That wouldn't be good enough, because you can't. Again, everything that we use will become treifos. Okay, okay.
It's like in America, we can't assume that it's really not chametz.
Of course you could. I mean, the din is really it's not chametz. It's not. So why do we make the mechiras chametz? God, we want to be extra careful. I don't know. I'm not sure what the point is.
Rabbi Price said there's one company. There's one company that has chametz vinegar in America. It's actually in the Chicago area.
He's a little bit walked back from that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
less than one or more than one?
Less.
Oh really?
Yeah. So he's
no.
when he said that there was one company that part of their production was chametz.
Yeah.
But I don't think he says that anymore. I'm not sure he even says it anymore. Okay. It's mom says very little. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Okay, if I remember, I'll tell you this thing afterwards. This pizza I skipped. Okay, how about kashering after vinegar? So, a few things. First is, we can't kasher something unless we get rid of all the be'en. Okay, that's sort of like a prerequisite. You can't kasher until you get rid of be'en. So, that's a fair shadid. Mishnah Berurah says, well, the same thing is, if there's an odor of a food left behind, you can't kasher that either.
Kashering after vinegar production or vinegar ingredient?
I don't care, whichever one you want to. Either
it's
one.
It's an ingredient in something. It's not going to have an odor.
I didn't say anything about it. You jumped ahead. Okay, so the Mishnah says that if something has an odor, and he's talking about making in a whiskey factory, he says it has an odor. You also can't kasher it. Now that's not as fairish. Okay, and the thing is, if there's be'en left, there's little residue in the food, then you can't kasher. Okay, Mishnah says, well, if it has the smell of that food in there, also you also can't kasher it. Okay, you have to, when you're kashering a place that had whiskey, not only do you have to do the traditional hagolah, you have to make sure there's no more smell to it left also.
So you can just spray air freshener or something?
No, well, it's list for 10 seconds. You know, I have a feeling. It comes from we think it's a little strange because of our misconception in our minds. You know. Kashering is this mystical, thing that we do, Al Pi Kabbalah, we do this thing that does the hasher it, and nothing to do with truth. But the truth is, of course, is that we kasher because there's blias in there, and there are things that are going to come out. So if there's still a smell, and then it's obvious that there's something left behind. Right?
It's stainless steel, so it never really happens to begin with.
But if it smells, then he's saying, come on, if it smells, it's obvious there's still something left behind. Harvard, there's something still there. So whatever that thing is, we got to get it out. And the mysterious thing that we did, this thing we did called Hagolah, it obviously didn't work. It's obvious that it didn't work because you can see. I suspect where it comes from. Anyhow, so the Mishnah says that for whiskey, He says it by whiskey. But the same thing is if you have something made with vinegar that still smells like it. So if you have like a vinegar factory, okay, or, again, if you made your ketchup out of it and it doesn't smell like it, doesn't smell. It's a practical thing. In other words, like Hagol is magical and this is practical. Okay, so if Lamaisa it still smells like vinegar, then you're up the creek. Okay, I forgot to say before I started this section. A lot of what's going on here about the Kashering stuff I'm going to tell you now comes from when there was this huge vinegar crisis in the 1980s, okay, where Charif vinegar had been used by everybody. All hashkachas were using it, and it turned. I think it was. I don't know if it was a Chametz problem to it also, but there was Charif, and there was a huge meeting of Rabbanim from hashkachas and just Stam rabbinic people there to talk about what to do. And one of the big questions that there was how to kasher the kalim making the vinegar, the kalim used vinegar. That was a big part of the questions. And Rosh Shechter wrote notes from that meeting. Okay, he was at the meeting. I wasn't. I was like 10. No, I was like 15, whatever I was. I wasn't at the meeting, but Rosh Shechter was, and he wrote notes of the meeting, anonymous. Anonymous. He didn't write who said what thing. He wasn't announced that he wrote it, but he didn't say, Chaim said this and Shmerel said this. He just wrote it of what the discussions were. And he didn't write that it was about that thing, but that was the truth. He just wrote a whole thing about kashering after vinegar, like as if it was just like this random thing, but it was notes from that whole big thing. It's very interesting. So a lot of what we're going to say is connected to that. Okay. Now I told you that way at the beginning today that Davacharif in the sheini has the din of a klirishin. Okay? So now, that means like this. Usually when we kasher, we have this big rule, kabbalah kachpoltei. That means that if something was belay as an iru klirishin, we can kasher it as iru klirishin. Okay, that's a general rule. Which means is, if we decide that Hagala is the way we have to kasher something, we don't need to do libum, we decide Hagala, then usually it's something we can accomplish. Because Kabbalah Kachpolte, we would like to do at Roislin, but we always know that the Ikra didn't do Kabbalah Kachpolte. However, it was Balei, it would kasher. So we sort of know what we have to do. We have to do what we did originally, give or take. That's what we have to do. Okay, but for when we had kashering after vinegar, we have a problem, and that's because if it was Balei through a sheini, then the machinery is set up to be a sheini, but we have to kasher like a klirishin because a hot Davacharif has a din of a klirishin. Okay, so this is something from a long time ago. There's a Daim Posen from Breuers who came up with this idea. He said, "Wait a second. So since klisheni, Davacharif and a klisheni has a din of a klirishin, you can't just do kabbalah kachpote. So let's say in a regular factory, if we had a kettle where they cooked food and then it went through a pipe to someplace else and then it went to another pot over there, we would say is the kettle we kasher like itself like a klirishin. The water flowing from it is iru klirishin. Okay, well." The blia was happening through iru klirishin, we kasher with iru klirishin, and the next over there is a klisheni. Okay, the blia happened to the klisheni, well, kasher is a klisheni. So we could follow the path of what we did. But over here, if we had hot vinegar, I don't know what the case of that is. Why would someone have hot vinegar? But if we had hot vinegar going from a kettle through a pipe, that pipe we wouldn't be able to kasher just by letting it flow from the original kettle because we're only doing iru over here, but the original. But it has the din of a klirishin.
Not for kashering purposes.
What do you mean not for kasher? Let's say you kasher with vinegar. Could I kasher with vinegar? That's an interesting question. Putting aside shar mashkim, putting aside the fact that shar mashkim. Okay, hold on a second. Put that aside for a second because that'll work with the evidence. You say maybe I should do. Can I do? Okay, never thought that. I'm not sure. Can I bounce it up myself? I'll turn it back into a klirishin. Maybe. Well, interesting idea. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. Okay, but I'm actually going to talk something about that, but not about that case. I have no idea about that. Never thought of that. Okay, the when vinegar is kovush in a kli, vinegar was kovush, which was the big issue at that time in the vinegar crisis. Vinegar is kovush in a kli. So then, usually when Isser is kovush, it's kovush k'mavoshel blias goes all the way through. Bli goes all the way through means you have to kasher in a way that will get the bli out from all the way deep inside. But as I told you before, when it's from Stam yayin or from Chametz, you don't have to do that. You only have to get a kedei klipa. Like the Shulchan Aruch says, if you physically scrape off a layer, a kedei klipa's worth of a layer, that's good enough. Okay, you don't have to get out more. You don't have to do any kashering if you do it. If you just scrape off a layer, that's good enough. What do you say?
Not like the shach.
Exactly like the shach. He says exactly the shach. He says in Hilchos Stam yayin, that's what he says. That he says if wine was kovush on a kli, he says just scrape off a klipa.
Shach.
The Mechaber says the shach.
Shach says only if it's not for 25.
The shach, no. The shach says this is. He says originally it was 25. He says that doesn't make any sense. He says it's a barrel where you keep wine in. You keep barrel in wine. You don't keep it for less than 24 hours. So he says it's a special kula for Stam yayin. Okay, that's what he said. Okay, and you could sit next to Kiva. You could think the way you think he says. But yeah.
Like Tzvi quotes him, like Chacham quotes to Shach.
I like the Mishnah Berurah quotes my word. That's okay. We today it's not today's debate. Okay. So you would therefore say now another way that you could kasher after Stam yayin, or in this case after vinegar, or after Chametz, is with mili v'irui. Okay. You can, but I can. You could kasher with mili v'irui. Okay, mili v'irui means is you let the water sit in it for 24 hours, and then after you drain it out, you do that 3 times. Okay, you could do mili v'irui because the blizzon you could do mili v'irui. Okay, so the din is you could do mili v'irui with any liquid. Okay, but the exception is you can't do mili v'irui with the same liquid, the same type of liquid that the bliyah happened with. So if the bliyah happened with vinegar, you can't do mili v'irui with other vinegar. Okay, that was the idea these people had was. Remember I told you last time that generators are things that they make vinegar for decades in a row. Okay, you can't turn them off. They don't turn them off, drain them out. Okay, we spoke this, and nowadays, the more modern way to do it, you probably can drain it out. But you can't empty it out and start again from scratch. It has to keep going. They say, what's the problem? But we'll just kasher it with more alcohol and vinegar that's in there. And the reason why that's incorrect is because you can't kasher with the same liquid that the Isser went in with, because mili v'irui works as a dilution, so you can't dilute vinegar with vinegar. You could dilute vinegar with apple juice.
With Kosher,
because that's like what I said was you can't use the same liquid, the same type of liquid that was in there. So this vinegar into vinegar doesn't get diluted. It doesn't get.
Is it for Shalach?
It's well. If you want, I'll tell you. I wasn't going to explain that, but we talked about it once before, and I'll tell you. The din says you're not allowed to kasher from wine. You can't do mili v'irui with other wine. You can do with any liquid. You can't do it with wine. Okay, it doesn't say why you're not allowed to do that. Okay, I don't know where it comes from originally. Rav Shachta said explained it like this. The reason is because mili v'irui works the way the price can speak about it is it dilutes the liquid that's in there and draws it out and dilutes it. And if you did it 3 times, it's so diluted that it became mutter. He says so you can only dilute something into something else. If I put wine into apple juice, it gets diluted. If I put apple juice into wine, it gets diluted. If I put wine into wine, it doesn't get diluted. It's still the same wine. He says, so if that's the logic for it, then the point is not. It's not that you can't do vinegar with wine. You can't do vinegar with the same liquid. So if this was vinegar, I can't do it to other vinegar. Okay, it's not because of the wine per se. It's because it's the same as what was in the original. Okay. Now, one other thing about kovush is that kovush takes 24 hours. We're saying it takes 24 hours even for vinegar, but another detail is that we assume that kovush happens. It has to be the same liquid, but the liquid doesn't have to be standing still. Even if the liquid is moving, it also has kovush as long as it's the same liquid, and that's very negate the Kashering and acetator because I guess a generator also it's acetated because the way I explained to you last time, the way you make it is you put the alcohol in and air bubbles through it and it bubbles furiously. The stuff is moving around continuously. Okay, but even so, we would consider that to be it would be
the same container.
Yeah, it's a tank. It's a tank. So it says a tank. I'm saying this because not everybody agrees to that, but we assume that kovush takes 24 hours. As long as it's the same liquid, even if it's moving within the tank, like it's in a truck and it's in a trailer and it's moving, it's sloshing around, it's still going to be kovush. Some people don't think like that. That's why I'm speaking it out. But in fact, it does. Even if it's moving around like in an acetator, it would still be kovush. Okay, I'm going to say one more little thing. It's a correction. Okay, I'm going to say 2 things. The first one is a correction to something I told you a long time ago, at least some of you, and that is the Mechaber says you don't make a bracha if you drink vinegar. Because it's not good for you. So if you make no bracha at all if you drink vinegar. And I said that I thought that was only what I said originally was it's only for full strength vinegar, meaning 120 grain, 12% vinegar. But if you have watered down, the Mechaber says if you water it down, then you do make a bracha on it. Okay, it's only dangerous to have it as is, but if you water it down, it's okay.
In those times, what was the strength today?
Same. It's the same thing. What happens is
That's a natural thing.
you start with wine that
Strength.
gets 12-13%, and at which point the microorganisms can't handle it, and then when you do the vinegar, it comes to the same thing because again the microorganisms plots at a certain point, so it's the same. Give or take, it's the same, and that's what they describe it. They have a strong vinegar, and then you water it down to use. So I don't know if they did exactly like us, but it comes out of 12%, then we water it down to 5%. Give or take, it's the same. But when I looked at it again, I didn't think I was correct what I said that time, because the Mechaber says his words are ala chaymich irvu b'mayim ad shiroi lishtos then mevarach shahako. Okay, so originally I was looking at it. If you watered it down, then it is able to be. You could drink it, and therefore you make a shahako. Now the way I read it this time, I read it differently. I thought you have to water it down to the point that it's able to be that it's drinkable, and at that point you make a shahako. And if you just water it to 5%, I don't think it becomes drinkable at that point. It's not our shiroi lishtos. So I disagreed with myself, and I think that you did not make a shahako yet. Okay, just because you have straight vinegar. Okay, and the last thing I'm just going to mention because I feel bad talking about vinegar, not saying it. The Gemara has a machlokes whether min b'minoi means whether it has to have the same time or it has the same referred to the same way. Basa shma or basa taima azinun. And the Gemara's example, I'm saying this because the Gemara's example of the nafkamina between those is chol decham and chol deshikra, wine vinegar and malt vinegar. Those are the examples that they're both vinegar, so they have the same shema, but they don't have the same tam. That's considered a different tam. A malt vinegar and a wine vinegar are considered a different tam. So just that's the Gemara's example. I didn't think I could mention it.